Welcome to all of you for this discussion on Beyond Equality, pushing frontiers of choices and opportunities. I think this is a critical aspect that we have to keep discussing, exploring, and understanding to see where we are as a country, as a community, as humanity, to ensure that when we talk about growth, development, climate change, and nearly any other challenge that we face, it cannot be done with equal participation of women leaders. Today we are going to be exploring with some of them about their own personal journeys, their professional experiences, and not just the past, but we'll also explore what needs to be done to improve the mindset and perhaps improve the path for the next generation of women leaders. I'm going to begin by asking Arshi Ayub Mohamed Zaveri. She is the CEO and Senior Advisor, Royal Family Offices of UAE, to talk about some of her experiences. Arshi, you have a fantastic profile in terms of not just being a CEO, but you're also in a position to influence several startups. You are actively supporting women entrepreneurs and startups. But when you, in your role, look at women, what is the first thing that you look at? Do you say that, well, they need support, I need to push them ahead? Or do you believe that they need equal opportunity and I'm going to make sure there's going to be equal opportunity?
Well, thank you so much, Pranjal, for the question. And firstly, we begin by thanking AIMA for getting all of us together. I see a full house, but I don't see them looking here. So we need to have everybody looking here, especially when it is a male-dominated room. It's good to see you all. And of course, like Pranjal just mentioned, being in the UAE and of course, looking at several businesses, looking at several young women who are building opportunities for themselves. One of the things that we generally come across are how do we economically empower them, financially empower them, socially empower them. However, when we actually go down to doing that, there is nothing to do. Because today, in the year 2022, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, the ruler of Dubai, Prime Minister of the UAE, has already been doing decades of work in order to empower women. The UAE cabinet has 9 female ministers. And they don't have them because they are female, but because they deserve to be there. Very critical portfolios. Extremely critical portfolios like advanced sciences, climate, food, international cooperation, education, justice are handled by women. Leadership has to be gender agnostic. We are not here and doing the work that we are doing because we are females or we are women who are doing that. We're doing it because we are people. Our merit has to be beyond our gender. So when we come across young women, we don't really have to do a lot of work, especially in the UAE. It's time we empower men. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think I want to stay with you for a second, Arshi. We also spoke earlier about the perception that perhaps in UAE, women don't get an equal chance and opportunity. Would you like to talk a little bit more about that?
We're getting started for a long session then.
Of course. I'm sure we can hold them on for another 2 hours.
At least I see all of them looking here, and it's good to see men looking here. So the Federal National Council has about 51% female representation. The Baraka nuclear plant, which was inaugurated last December, has about more than 70% female nuclear scientists working on the project. The mission to Mars, recently applauded by the world and of course by the Indian government as well, was under the leadership of a minister who happens to be female, not because she's a female minister. The World Expo, which was lauded by the entire world, Dubai Expo, was under the spearheaded fine leadership of a minister who again happens to be female. All of these achievements are not given to them because of their gender, but because they deserve it. So that's how we must look at opportunity, equality, and more importantly, gender intelligence. We're not here because we are women. We're here because we deserve to be so. And that's how the outlook should be, very importantly. And one of the things that you said about perceiving women in the Middle East as to be, how do you put it, conservative?
Perhaps.
Conservative?
Or held back?
How do you deserve being conservative? By attire? By thought? How do you define being conservative? Everybody is uniformly dressed over here. I don't see anybody conservative. It's about what you choose to do. If I choose to do this, this is my idea of being modern, or rather my idea of being myself. I will not conform to the norms or the stereotypes that have been put together by the West. That's not something that will define my narrative. My thought defines my modernity. My work speaks about how modern I am and how well the society will become from the impactful different initiatives that the country is involved in collaboration also with the Indian government. So really the perception, if I may say, one has to be updated. If people think so, they have to sort of become a little updated. It's time we do away with these archaic thought processes of women in the Middle East being oppressed, or, you know, the kind of words that you may come across. I told you, we don't need women empowerment. His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, or the UAE President, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, they put women here. They stand up when a woman enters the room. That's how leadership is. That's the respect that one should have. And not because they are women, but because that's what people do. That's what humanity should do. You have to respect one another.
Thank you. That's very inspiring. But of course, we have to recognize the fact, Arshi, that UAE is setting benchmarks not just for Middle East, but for the rest of the world. And I think that leadership has to be recognized, and we have to celebrate that. But speaking of being conservative, Vinita, I have to come to you. So you grew up in a conservative Marwadi family. You were a head of a business group. How was it growing up, and how difficult or easy was it for you to say that, you know, I have an equal right to lead the group?
Hi, first, good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So, Pranjal, we are...
I hope the mic's working. I think the mic's not working. Can we get a replacement mic? Okay, this one should work. Thank you.
Yeah, so Pranjal, I would like to begin by saying that we are already seeing a reversal of the stereotype that, women, like in our Marwadi families, there's a thing that women don't support other women. But we are already seeing a reversal of the stereotype that, women in the Marwadi families are supported not only by men, but by the women in the family. Now, I would like to reflect on my journey growing up in a traditional Marwadi family in India, and the paradigm shift I have seen in the mindsets of 3 generations of women in my family. Now, I remember growing up, my grandmother always telling me about the domestic skills I needed to learn as a girl in order to be a dutiful daughter-in-law, because for her, that was the ultimate goal in my life. Now, coming to the 2nd generation was my mother, who always encouraged me to study hard and do well. For her, the goal in my life was to get an educated husband, raise intelligent children, and help out in the family business. Pursuing a full-time independent career was not an option for me. Now, coming to the 3rd generation, which was me, I decided not to succumb to the societal pressure to get my daughter married after college, but fully supported her decision to work, pursue her master's in public policy and work professionally in the social impact sector. Now, her work entails traveling to the remotest corners of the world, undertaking projects in improving lives and creating livelihoods. When she gets married, it will be on her terms. So this shift in mindsets and attitudes across 3 generations shows that the role of women in our society is indeed getting redefined. So since I come from the second generation, definitely it was difficult for me because juggling various roles, and you as women are we as women are supposed to do each do full justice to each role. So, but we as women need to be comfortable in making trade-offs between work and family and not feel constantly guilty about it. So, which is what I managed to do, having, getting married at the age of 18 and then completing my studies.
Can I interrupt you? Why is it assumed that the role of managing the family has to be yours and not your husband's? I mean, that's for any couple. Managing the family and the children, why is it always assumed that the lady of the house has to do it, whether she's a professional and has a job or not? How many instances are there of the male partner also contributing to the home?
See, in my time, it was naturally assumed that the mothers-in-law would help out with the children and the household duties, but nowadays, definitely the husbands must equally contribute. So, I mean, now, great support systems are needed at work and home, and since, we have nuclear families, but this was the traditional way of thinking, especially in the Marwadi families, that men are not supposed to help out with the...
So let's ask in the hall, since they're mostly men, how many men help at home?
My grandchildren, yes.
Okay.
So this is...
And how many men think that they help at home? So I'm glad to see that there is some honesty left in among men. Those who think that they are helping are actually fewer. But go on, please.
But Pranjal, if you rewind, 20 years back, how many men helped out?
Yes.
That would be an answer I would love to know. I mean, yeah, that's the question. So
I think there are some hands there that even 20 years ago they were helping, and I think you were the leaders for your generation, and I think that has inspired many more men. So that's a positive sign, Vinita.
Yeah, that is a positive sign. We do see changes happening around us.
Excellent. I'm going to come to you, Palki, about choice. It's not just about the women's choice, it's also the men's choice, right? We are now seeing that some men choose to help and some men don't.
The thing about choice is that if you look at any power balance throughout history, when you want something, you'll not be given that thing on a platter. This includes equality, this includes anything. You have to take it. So I think it's time women stopped expecting the society to do things. And I like to talk about choice more than equality or opportunity is because your choice determines the opportunity you get. And we're all sitting here on this stage, and I'm very happy to see 1 man and 4 women talking about, it's happened to me in the past that we're talking about women's equality and they're all men talking about it. So we have come a long way. But for us to be sitting here and saying what we're saying, we have to be mindful of the fact that many, many women fought for us to be able to vote, for us to be able to go and study, for us to be able to pick and choose what we wanted to do in life. And today I see a trend that sometimes disturbs me because we are still the privileged few who can sit and share our thoughts about where women stand and what they should be doing. There are many, many women out there in the world who are still oppressed, and we have a long way to go. And when some of us decide midway in our careers that now I choose to focus on family, I choose to take a break, we are doing immense disservice to the women who will follow us in workplaces because we are not building boardrooms and offices and workplaces outside home where women are leaders. There aren't enough women leaders still. And every woman who walks out of the workforce is doing a disservice to that movement. So we need to pay it forward, which is why I say that choice is very important. People say this all the time, that your life is about the choices you make. Yes, it is. So we have to choose responsibly. And this choice of not doing something outside of your home is, I think, a myth. Women should stop trying to exercise this choice because they don't have this choice, frankly.
So you're saying that women must go out and be taking become professionals or entrepreneurs?
Absolutely, absolutely, because
So you're saying nobody should be a homemaker, as it were?
I'm saying that how many men have the choice? How many 40-year-old men can one day come home and say, now I want to focus on my children, I don't want to work? Society will not let them be. That same parameter should apply to women. We cannot pick and choose when we want to be only homemakers and when we want to be career makers. If we have had that platform, and I know it's a bit of a controversial position to take, but we have to do it. Because if we don't do it, then who is going to, then the women who, I think of my daughter, and I know that when she enters a workplace, when she enters a college, she will have to fight some of the battles that I fought and that my mother fought. Because not enough of us were willing to juggle, and it's not easy for anyone. I'm not saying balancing work and home is going to be easy. It never was meant to be. But then you have to take the tough road. You look at Fortune 500 companies, you look at any office anywhere in the world, how many of them have more women leaders than men? They don't. So the onus is on us to make the right choices, I think.
You know, you're one of the few people who's talked about this issue of choice, even for men, and I completely agree. I grew up I studied in a boys' school, and I know at least 30% boys who were very lazy, didn't want to work, and hoping to have a working wife. But you're absolutely right. For them, there was no such choice, because it brings me to the question of role perceptions, where the families, at the first instance, decide what a daughter should do and what a son should do. And it's somehow infused into your thinking. So when you speak of choice, then perhaps the choice has already been eliminated when you were growing up, and the family unit then becomes the core for ensuring that the option of choice is instilled in you.
So I too come from a very traditional family in Rajasthan, and we had clear gender roles. But what my parents gave me was an education. And yes, your family shapes you, and yes, how your family, and I'm not saying that they stopped me from doing anything, but it was assumed that at a certain age I'll get married, focus on my family, do something, maybe become do a part-time thing. I don't want to name a profession, but whatever. So, but then you learn outside the family too. You make your choices. You can't blame your family for saying they did not, and it cannot be the same for any two women. I'm sure there are struggles that I cannot even begin to imagine. And I will not speak for them. But for those who can, for those who have the choice that they think they have to exercise it responsibly is all I'm saying. And when we get an education, it opens our mind. We can try and pursue things that perhaps our mothers could not.
I think that's a very valid point. The point about choice, it has to be made, and it has to be made aggressively for the good of the future generations. Milan, as an author, as also a veteran advertising professional, I think convincing societies, people, is a factor of the narrative which is there in public discourse, whether what we read, what we see in advertising. And often people think that advertising is a great social force or force for social change, not just consumption. What has been your experience? How have you used your platforms, either as an author or an advertising business leader, to make a change and make a difference?
Thank you, Pranjal, and I would begin with again thanking AIMA for this session to kick off the whole thing, because it is such a relevant topic, but I think that most of us, don't speak frankly enough. First of all, I'd like to agree with Palki when she says that, all of us here, we are sitting in a very, very privileged bubble to be even talking about, saying that, what are my choices, and saying, can I pursue? And I think when we looked at the outline of this panel and saying, can we look at alternate choices? How far away are we from gender parity? And we're, light years away or whatever. I mean, everybody here has the numbers, I'm sure. So, for most people, that option doesn't even exist to say, okay, I'm not going to get parity, so should I be trying for something else? For me, I think for a very long time, I knew I wanted to be a storyteller. At that time, I think, the authors that I read were all too remote. They were far away. It wasn't really a career option. I grew up with a family of teachers. My parents were both professors, but thankfully it was never said to me that, oh, choose teaching as a profession, you'll be able to juggle life and home and all of that. It was, it was a very equal opportunity environment, and again I say it was a privilege to have that. So I entered advertising, and I realized that I love the ability to tell stories, but at the end of the day, advertising is only going to help sell a product, and it will only do it most of the time when people buy into what you're saying. You are not actually pushing the envelope. Very few brands will, have the balls, and the brand managers have the balls, and I don't have any gender bias when I say this, to say I'm willing to make a change. I remember sitting in on research discussions for a long time on a fast food brand, where even a simple decision of changing the look of the mother for that fast food brand, saying, can we just make her a little less fair than she was debated a lot and then rejected. And when it finally happened, I remember there was a lot of, discussion on just that very simple change. So there are very few brands that will actually say, let's, push the narrative. A couple of watch brands and so on have done it. So it was very frustrating for me to be in that environment, which I loved the vibrance of, but it didn't let me do what I hoped to be doing in life. And so I started writing fiction in the hope that I could do it. Another thing that, I felt had shaped me a lot was the fact that we grew up listening to so many stories. And again, I say, this is us in our little privileged bubble. I mean, look at the fairy tales that we grew up hearing. It makes me aghast even now to think of stories like, say, the Little Mermaid. A Little Mermaid who was willing to say, I'll lose my legs and go back to becoming a mermaid for the sake of this love. I mean, what were we glorifying? That a woman makes all these sacrifices. You had a sleeping beauty who was sitting there waiting to be kissed and woken up from, her slumber by the prince who comes. I love gaming, as many people do, and I look at, this whole thing of, when we talk of damsels in distress, you have this whole jargon in gaming which is called damseling, which is where somebody goes and rescues somebody, and most of the time it's a prince who's going and rescuing a princess from a dragon or from various other threats. If you look at most narratives, it's the man who is going there and facing an outer enemy. It's always going to be some external force, a monster or an enemy of a corporate kind or whatever else. And when you're looking at women's stories, what are we looking at? What is she facing? She's sitting and facing inner demons, she's sitting and facing battles at home. So the narrative has been like this for so long that to me, fiction opened a small window to be able to say I can change the narrative in a pretty nice little sugar-coated way. So, for example, in my last book, in Our Song, which is about a musician, the fact is that whenever, we know that whenever women tread into areas that are typically male-dominated, and in this case, she was getting into the area of Pakka Hindustani music, there was somebody in that story and in the narrative who is very threatened. And what does threat take? I mean, it eventually leads to, say, forms like molestation or harassment and so on, which is basically, we all know it's power play. And so how does your character respond? These are ways that we can subtly shift and try and bring change. And because it's packaged in a romance, people are going to pick it up, they're going to still get that nice sugar-coated thing, but they're going to align with these stories and say, I could also respond the way this character did. And to me, that has been the biggest reward of, becoming an author, where people come and they actually start personally saying, this happened to me. Do you know that this happened to me? And these are stories that are always told one-on-one. They're never going to be at a lit fest where you sit in a panel.
But Milan, this point about damsel in distress, it's very interesting that the West thinks of Asia as regressive, when they are the ones who created tropes like this, where you constantly have a blonde being rescued by a man on a horse, which is not really the Asian way of thinking if you look at our heritage and what our lores have been. But it also brings me to the point that the world that we think would be driving change, the media world, the world of publishing, the world of movies, the world of advertising perhaps, is actually pretty regressive too. If you look at the fact that there is roaring controversies about how women actors get paid 30 to 40% less than male actors, where you have a situation where even some of the now famous J.K. Rowling had to begin as pretending to be a male author and not a female author because publishers would not have accepted her earlier. And there are several examples in history of women writers coming out and publishing as male writers because, you know, everybody felt that male writers will be taken more seriously. Have things actually changed or there is still a long way to go?
So I think that especially when it comes to popular cinema, when you're looking at big budget stuff, you know, again, it's going to be reflective of change rather than pushing for change. So if you look at, say, even when a film like Queen came out with Kangana Ranaut, and it was saying, here is this woman who's saying, okay, there is this man who's jilted me on the eve of my marriage, but I'm going out and going to have a holiday and a honeymoon on my own, and it's actually a, you know, a sort of a self-celebration or a self-discovery film. I mean, how many smaller films and smaller stories would have needed to happen across the world? I'm not just talking of India, saying even a Juno, you know, film written by a woman for a woman is going to affect the change far more effectively than a big budget film. But that's where the change happens. Even say a film like Frozen, where you say, I don't need a man to come rescue me, I'm going to be, you know, I mean, I remember the sister telling the other sister, Anna, and I forget the character's name, saying, what, are you going to fall in love with the first man who kissed you? I mean, let's just start breaking these myths. You know, so the fact that big budget production houses, even like say Pixar or Disney, the fact that they could come out with a Frozen would have taken years and years and years of trying to change stereotypes to be, say, now people are going to accept this kind of message because nobody's going to sink hundreds of crores in saying, let me change the world. They're still there to make money.
You know, also what we did even in Bollywood in the 90s, we basically normalized stalking. You know, a hero chasing a heroine throughout the movie and then finally, bingo, everything is perfect. But Arshi, coming to you, you know, and I'm going to build on this narrative piece that Milan talked about, and you referred to it earlier, this whole Western narrative versus the Asian narrative, the perception of the Asian people being less progressive. How do you interpret it, especially from the fact that even media, which is supposed to be making a change and a difference, is actually not doing so?
Well, I think media in itself, and there are far more qualified people on the panel to speak about that particular industry specifically. I can only tell you from what I have experienced. In order to make change, in order to really portray what is correct and what is not, you must do it. Let me give a small example to the audience here. Now, a couple of years ago, I mean, this instance is still fresh in my mind. We don't remember what happened last week, but I do remember this pretty clearly. While crossing now, everybody is aware of how members of the government, or for that matter, prime ministers and presidents travel. They have days and days of planning and moving around and protocol and so on and so forth. His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Prime Minister of the UAE and ruler of Dubai specifically, happened to have his convoy merge with my car. Situation, when you have so many vehicles and then you have your own in the way, you stop. Okay. He said, wait, let the woman go. This is what changes mindset. This is what changes me. This is what helps me understand that how men are today, how leaders are today. He didn't need to do that. He shouldn't probably have. Being the ruler, he has the liberty to do whatever he wants in the country. But he chose to do that. That speaks volumes by doing it and not by saying it, empower women, empower women. No, we can talk about empowerment all day and not really do it. You must do it. You must be able to drive change. And I have seen it in my personal capacity and in a professional as well, that men have been pivotal in terms of driving change. They have really created a community that is putting women here. And that must be commended. That must be. We see how leaders behave today. They are standing behind. Let others proceed. That's how leadership should be. It shouldn't just be in the words that sound good, look good, are portrayed well by media. No, it's these small instances that really help you understand them when there is no media tracking. There's nobody on the back foot tracking it, this is how you should behave. No, this leaves a mark in your memory as to how men today are. They understand the contribution of women in society. You cannot witness prosperity if you stifle the growth of women in your country, in your community, in your homes. You must put them up and above. And that's how I can say is the role of the community that resides with you. Media, probably, I think Palki is a far more qualified candidate to speak about how media should respond to how things are perceived in society. But really, one must do it in their individual capacity. As men, as women, we mustn't disrespect diversity. We mustn't disrespect the fact that everybody has a key role to play. We must not do that. I am probably, most of the times that I witnessed, like how she said, that we are probably the only man on the panel. It's actually other way around for me. I'm probably the only woman in the room most of the times. But that does not stop the men from listening. They're far more interested to hear what I'm saying. They don't need to do that, but they're doing it because they understand that we have to hear. We need to progress as a society, and we must ensure that women and their voices are heard. Most of the times that's the only thing that works. So clearly it continues. And that's how you can really progress as a society.
Thank you. That's powerful words, and I think actions speak louder than words, absolutely. Vinita, the word diversity, and we often see that it has become a convenient way of corporations to take care of issues of gender. Let's have a little bit of diversity in our board. Let's have a few women, or perhaps other people who are different in the company, so that we can say, well, we encourage diversity. But diversity without empowerment perhaps is what we are seeing these days. Would you agree?
Definitely. See, going to your point on the, there have been various regulatory actions that have helped women. Like the Companies Act 2013, which mandates every listed company to appoint at least one woman director on their boards. While this act has opened up many interesting board positions for deserving women, and companies too have benefited immensely from boardroom diversity. But, unfortunately, as sole women directors, it can often be very intimidating to walk into a patriarchal boardroom, and oftentimes we have to struggle to make our voices heard. Now, there's another one, the Prevention for Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act 2013. While this act mandates every employer to provide a safe working environment for all women employees, with penal consequences for any violations thereof, but there are no well-laid policies for dealing with the cases of sexual harassment. And as a result, most of the studies actually show that more than 70% cases of sexual abuse in workplace are going unreported. So while these acts are in place, they have to be followed in spirit more than in letter. And again, Pranjal, about, you were talking about empowering women, in spirit. So yes, in our organizations, see, we, business communities, we have the opportunity to be visionaries of for the country in shaping the narrative around women's participation and equality in workplace. So in our organizations, we need to invest in the learning and development of women by giving them reskilling, upskilling opportunities. So there also you need that additional support. In my organization, I've seen that while devising women-friendly policies like work from home, flexi working hours, maternity leave, has helped me retain women employees who tend to drop out of workforce, especially after childbirth. But additional support is needed. For instance, in my tea estate, I had an on-premise creche where the children of the women workers were taken care of by trained helpers while the mothers worked. So we talk about mentoring as being very empowering, but you know, actually hand-holding is needed, because what is the use of showing them the path by mentoring if the roads to forge ahead do not exist? So we have to create enabling environment and infrastructure all around us. So if we need women around us to be perfect wives, great daughters-in-law and super moms, we have to have great support systems all around us. And
You need to have super dads and you need to have super son-in-laws
no,
also.
why? Why do we need men supporting us? We,
No, I'm saying you have to apply the same standard on them.
absolutely. I mean, they have to be, you know, help us out as absolutely.
No, they have to be equal contributors.
No,
I'm
no.
going to take some questions
For
from the audience, but before that, a quick point I want to raise with Palki, which is, you spoke about choice and we've talked about various roles that different individuals should play, but institutionally, do you think that institutions have a role in ensuring this? Something which Vinita alluded to, our judiciary, our political ecosystem and leadership, business leadership. It's not just about individual strength, and you cannot always say, well, you have to fight through and you have to smash the patriarchy and do it all alone. Hopefully somebody will support you, but do we need institutional support even today to ensure that the choice that you are referring to is as commonplace as it should be?
Of course, we need institutional support. I think it's important to co-opt institutions and men and women and everyone else you can think of, because it's not easy to transform society on the scale that we're discussing. Having said that, like Vinita said, that you have laws in place, but they don't really make any meaningful difference. That happens when that institutional support is mere tokenism, right? So, which is why I come back to the point of choice. If there are enough women leaders, they would know when a woman is walking up to them and saying that, I'm expecting a child. So you don't see that resource as a liability, and you don't start thinking that this person is going to be out of action for 6 months. So maybe I need to, build a team where I have fewer liabilities of this sort. People do these things all the time, and they make these calculations because, as you said, at the end of the day, businesses have to look at bottom lines. But when you have enough women who empathize and who understand, then I think institutions will truly transform, and not just.
One quick example to the point of maternity leave. Now there's paternity leave, right? Is that a solution, or is that anyway useful? For example, because then it's seen as perhaps, is it tokenism or is it real, empowerment of the family unit?
I think it is not tokenism. I think it's important for a father to also see what a mother goes through. I think a young mother goes through a lot of challenges physically, psychologically in her society, and it's important for both the parents to be part of that journey. So I don't think that is tokenism. The point I was making was so when we say women's representation, we think of quota. Quota has not helped. We've had quota in politics for so many years. 30% for women or whatever.
Which is often not implemented also.
It is not implemented. It makes no difference, because more often than not, the woman who's filling that quota seat is a representative for a man. So you need.
So I don't know if people know, sorry to interrupt you, there's something called Sarpanch Pati. So the Sarpanch may be a woman, but it's really the Pati who's calling all the shots, right?
So that's what I'm saying. It's not a meaningful change, because this is just, you've just tried to make it look good on paper.
If I may add to that, I was speaking with some friends and journalists, and they were telling me about an incident at an engineering college where there was, diversity hiring is part of, the requirement. But there was this bunch of girls who were going up for interview, and they were severely bullied before they went, because the guys knew that they're going to get hired because of this whole filling the quota for the diversity hire. And the girls were a wreck before they actually went on, and the whole confidence and the whole, getting prepped with a positive frame of mind before you've gone in for an interview, all of that is actually, when it comes to implementation, is destroyed, because the goal might have been saying I'll get that many number of women in, but those women are actually being destroyed because of improper implementation.
That's a good point to close on. The fact remains that if you believe in this, if you believe in gender equality, if you believe in the fact that we have to make sure that everybody has equal opportunity and we have the right to make the choice, then along our sphere of influence, whether in the family or workplace, we have to ensure that it happens. And that's how society will change. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Arshi Ayub Mohamed Zaveri, Ms. Vinita Bajoria, Ms. Palki Sharma, Ms. Milan Vohra, and Mr. Pranjal Sharma for being with us today and sharing your views. May I now request Mr. Rajiv Kaul, past President AIMA, to present mementos to the esteemed speakers.